another little, what's called a state machine, get it down to a little over 2 chips, and then search through manuals and come up with 1.25 chips that did the whole job. I would do one thing after another were the most incredible designs of my life, and this became the Apple II. The night I tested it, and I could type a number into memory, and a blue square popped up on my TV. I typed another number into memory, and a yellow square popped up. I wrote a little program, and it started doing lines back and forth of different colors. I called Steve Jobs over, and we saw this thing, and we knew this one we weren't going to give away. This was going to be a major item in the world. Small, little hobby computers had taken off and were selling bigger and bigger quantities. We were going to sell 1,000 of them. 1,000 computers at $500 each. That's $500,000. That's a big deal. We didn't have any money. We went down to companies looking to try to talk them into it. The companies, just Atari and Commodore, decided to build their own machines once they saw it. We went to venture capitalists, and we didn't speak business talk. We went to, finally we found an angel, a guy who had worked at Intel, and he retired from the rat race. He had a stock option, he had his $1.5 million, and he was living in the Cupertino Hills, and he was looking for something exciting to do in electronics. He believed that this market was for home computers, people using computers to manage their checkbooks, to keep track of their home recipes, all that stuff, that this was going to be the big market. And it was going to be we were going to be $1 billion company in 5 years. And I just thought, oh, the more successful you are, the bigger number you can talk. You can never be that big. $1 million would be huge. And he's talking that way, and he was willing to put in the big money to start our company as a real company. And the hitch was I had to leave Hewlett-Packard. And I said, wait a minute, I've designed 2 computers, I've written, designed floppy disk interfaces, I wrote a basic language, all these other programs. I've done it all in a year, moonlighting. Why don't I just keep my job forever at Hewlett-Packard and moonlight for Apple? And he said, no, you have to leave Hewlett-Packard. Very tough decision. Internally, I said no at first. And finally, I changed my mind when I realized I could start Apple and I could be an engineer forever. That was my decision. My role was to be an engineer, nothing else. Bottom of the org chart. I'm still getting a paycheck from Apple, and I'm at the bottom of the org chart. And that's where I want to be. I keep a little tiny paycheck all the time so I can say, I'm the only person ever in the history of Apple that has never been off the payroll computer one day. It's a game. It's a game. It's a game more than it's real. So anyway, we started this company with the Apple II, a great little product. It made big splashes on waves, got known as worldwide attention. But your programs were on these little slow cassette tapes. They took forever to load in a program, a couple of minutes, and go beep, but now your program might work. So, came about a year later, and the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, the show where they show the new hi-fis, televisions, all the electronics equipment young engineering students want to see, was going to be, they were going to allow personal computers in for the first time. That meant Apple, Commodore, and Radio Shack. Those 3 companies. And from Apple, we were going to send Mike Marklow, who funded us. He was our elder mentor who told us how to establish a company, who to hire. He's really the one that was in charge of Apple's success. To find Steve Jobs' role as becoming an executive in every department, and my role as engineering. Mike Marklow would go, our sales guy Jim Carter would go, and Steve Jobs would go to Las Vegas. And I was too shy to say, can I go? Or I insist on going, So, but as an engineer, you always try to play tricks. So I said, the show was in 2 weeks, and I said, if we have a floppy disk, would we show it? Hadn't even started thinking about making a floppy disk, but I knew now, if I developed, and Mike Marklow said yes, I knew if I developed a floppy disk in 2 weeks, instead of a year, I would get to see the lights of Las Vegas. I worked every day, Christmas Day, New Year's Day. I had never worked near disk drives in my life. I didn't know how they were designed and built, so I did this optimal design that came out to originally 5 chips. And our competitor had 50 chips, and I looked over, studied their design. Oh my God, mine did more. And I took out 20 chips off the drive we bought from Shoe Garden, because I said, I've got a computer that can program it and get rid of all their little language and let me have more ability to do more things. And great thing is floppy disk. So that was successful, and I got to see Las Vegas. And I taught our young high school programmer Randy Wigington how to play craps, and he won $35. So, around that time, VisiCalc, the first spreadsheet program, came out. There were 3 personal computers in the world. The Radio Shack and Commodore were closed architectures. You couldn't add memory to them. They had 4K or 8K. not enough for VisiCalc. The Apple II had up to 48 KB of memory, slots you could plug more in, slots you could plug in the floppy disk and everything. The Apple II was the only machine that could write this first spreadsheet program, VisiCalc, for it. So it came to the Apple II. A small businessman would go into a computer store, type in some month by month, some projected expenses and income, and see the results on the bottom line 6 months later, and make a little change in how they might order things and see the effect. They'd buy it instantly. They would buy the Apple II, some expansion board, some extra memory, and this program. Our sales shot up 10 times. Now we had a sense for how big this market was and where it was really going. Apple was going to be a huge company and the first company ever to sell 1 million computers. And it was really based upon a killer app that made sense to a businessman that could do something in 1 hour that he knew would take him 10 years by hand with pencil and paper. So we had a real machine now. Steve Jobs was always worried from the day we started about competition. He would talk about IBM's going to be, getting into this market. They're going to, chomp us down. And my market was more calm. We're a group of people with intelligence. They have a group of people with intelligence. If we do our job and keep our machine as good quality, we can hold on to our market share as the market grows. And so we decided to build a business machine, the Apple III. But the engineers didn't decide to do it like we would have in Hewlett-Packard. Apple was a marketing-driven company. So the marketing people decided what the features of this business computer should be. And it was more closed, not totally closed. It was a little harder to get information about and write your programs and design hardware for than the Apple II. But there were thousands of Apple II programs. Everyone wanted to run their Apple II programs, games and databases and spreadsheets and word processors for their company. So to sell the Apple III, we built it into 2 modes. You had a switch. You could boot it up as an Apple II, or you could boot it up as an Apple III. And the Apple III let you have up to 80 columns of text on the screen, and it let you have lots of extra memory for your big spreadsheets. When you put it in Apple II mode, we actually had to, in engineering, we were told we had to put chips in to decrease the screen size and to have less memory. The things the businessmen wanted, we had to take out of the Apple II mode so that they would be encouraged to buy the Apple III. That is either correct or incorrect marketing. I can't decide for myself. But it bothered me as an engineer. Why would you put chips in, parts and money, to disable what people wanted? The Apple III was a big failure for a lot of reasons. First of all, IBM was getting into the business market, and they had reps getting into all the big companies that bought thousands of computers. IBM, and also the Apple III, when it came out, didn't have any software. Only 1 out of 7 programs was done, and that was the one done outside of Apple. We weren't very good at learning how to make software yet. And the hardware, we had so many hardware problems. You take this computer, the Apple III, and if it didn't work, you bounce it on the table from 3 inches up, pow, and now it would work. And there were a lot of reasons for that. So that one was pretty unsuccessful. A guy named Jeff Raskin came to Steve and I. And he said, look, you can have 2 sets of chips. And those chips you can build into computers. And the computers can be equal calculation ability. But in one of them, if you put in a lot of your own software, you can make it work intuitively and easy for a human being. And that's the way you should build a computer. So somebody who's never used a computer in their life can figure out how to use it. Maybe a spouse, maybe a child, maybe a 5th grader. And it really got to us. So we wanted to build an easy computer. Jeff Raskin took us down to Xerox PARC Center, where they actually had the modern mouse-driven GUI approach to computers that they were working on. It wasn't very advanced like what we're used to now, but it was there. We went down and saw it. And once you saw that, oh my God, once you have that, you'll never step back to computers where you have to type in and memorize statements to get files to move from here to there. So the drag and drop, the Definer's drag and drop of the Lisa computer was actually the first time ever drag and drop popped up in an application on a computer. Well, Steve Jobs said, look, you guys have this computer at Xerox. $50,000 you're going to sell it for. We are the ones, we took the big, huge mainframes and Woz figured out how to make it down at an affordable price, $1,000, $2,000. We're the ones to take your product to the masses. And worked out some deals, and they got some Apple stock, and they let us see their stuff. And we went to work to build that kind of computer. We hired a bunch of very smart people that cared about humans, teachers, and academics from the East Coast. A lot of them came, brilliant people. Some came over from Xerox PARC Center, and they cared about things being the human way. We don't call a screen, we call it a desktop because everybody's familiar with a human desktop. That was a human paradigm. And we made little icons that looked like things like paintbrushes. They looked like what they did. We tested and tested people in rooms all alone, not knowing that we're watching them through two-way mirrors, and watching them to see how they have trouble figuring out how to use a computer when they're told nothing. No manual, no nothing. We figured out how many menus, what sizes, numbers to put, what kind of icons to use, what size the fonts should be, where they should be, how many menu bars. We tested and tested to make it easy to use by someone who knew nothing. And that was the Lisa computer. The Lisa computer had a megabyte of RAM, a huge number in those days. The computer cost, as a result, a megabyte of RAM cost $5,000. The computer cost $10,000. That's like $20,000 today. Who would buy a personal computer for $20,000? It wasn't going to be an Apple mainstream product, this Lisa. Meanwhile, Steve Jobs had worked on the Lisa program, but he walked into rooms and tell them they were just idiots, you know, he wanted another Steve Wozniak or something, and he'd be very rude. So they kicked him out of the building, wouldn't let him near the Lisa project. So he went over, Jeff Raskin, the guy who brought humanism into Apple, and to Steve Jobs' mind, was running the Macintosh division. I was working on the Macintosh. I'd gone over there because the most creative people, the outsiders, the ones nobody else wanted in their groups, the guys who had never gone to college but had become the best hardware designers we had in the company, the ones who thought so intensely about engineering that they were kind of hippies from Berkeley, they were working on the Macintosh group. And I went over and joined that group, and then Steve came over, and eventually he displaced Jeff Raskin. Around that time, I had a plane crash. And I was a pilot, and I came out of amnesia 5 weeks later. And as soon as I came out of amnesia, it was a very strange thing. I went back to school and studied a lot of memory stuff. But I came out of amnesia, and I called up Steve Jobs, and I said, Apple really has enough good engineers, and they're going to go on fine without me. I'm going to go back to college and get my degree. And so that was my decision. In other words, the fact that we made huge fortunes in Apple Computer and all that I wasn't going to let it change me. I wanted to be the person I knew that I was. The same values that I had when I was 18 or 20 years old and finding my way in the world. So I did go back to Berkeley under a fake name, Rocky Raccoon Point. That's what it says on my diploma. And I got away with it. My name was known, but not my face. So the final day of finals, there on the top front of Time magazine is being Steve Jobs. So that was about the end of it. But I pulled it off. You know, you do things. Well, later on in life, and I didn't put on the rock concerts I'm proud of, and, you know, I wanted my own life. I didn't want to be a big, mega businessman dealing with CEOs of the world, pushing people around. Power was not my thing in life. And I went out and did a lot of philanthropy. I grew up in San Jose. The cities, the institutions I grew up in, the schools I grew up in, gave so many millions back to all of them as I could. By the way, when Apple went public, I also saw that a whole few people at the top of the company had huge amounts of stock. They're becoming so much wealthier than they'll ever need in their life. And I was one of them. But there's a whole ton of people that were so important in our family of developing these products, believing in them, working hard, and encouraging even me to go on. So I did a WOZ plan where I basically sold them stock that they'd each make a house out of it to about 80 of the engineers and marketing people. And I gave stock, millions of dollars worth, to about 5 key people that have been there since the start. Why didn't they have stock? I couldn't understand it. And that was just how I was in life. So anyway, I did, after the philanthropy years, I had children, and they were starting to get into schools, and I was giving lots of computers to the local schools. That's what you kind of do when you're big in technology in Silicon Valley. And I thought, you know what, if you have a lot of money, it's trivial to give it. It doesn't have a meaning. It's easy to give it. I said, what you do, you give something valuable. You make a sacrifice. You give your time. So I went into the school district and I started teaching, not knowing if I could do it, teaching how to use your computer to make your homework look better, to do all your schoolwork better. And I taught 200 hours a year to 5th graders. And after I started having success with that, I taught 6th to 9th graders too, advanced students. And then I started teaching groups of teachers in my district. So I was teaching 7 days a week, and I did this for 8 years, secretly, no press allowed. I didn't do it for publicity. I didn't do it. Apple wanted me to make CDs that taught people how to do things. I don't want to reach 1 million people. I want to reach little individuals in a classroom, one-on-one. I wanted to my whole life be a teacher. So I made it. And in the meantime, Apple went through a lot of troublesome periods. We'd go